By the spirit of John and Diogenes. Um, Keep your thoughts pulsating with health and optimism. The mind is a powerful dynamo. As you think, so will you attract equivalent vibratory responses. He will cultivate his illness, suffers illness. He who preserves his health always get over illness. Think right, and you will be inspired by God to find the best solutions. An edifying thought is a prayer without words, which is always heard. So let's close our eyes and let's elevate our thoughts and thank God and all the good spirits here with us today for the opportunity to be here once again, and also to bless our friend Teresa and the lecture that she's gonna give us today. So be
All right, good morning, everyone. It's nice to have you all here today. We're going to be talking about Kardec's journey in the beginning of Spiritism. I think a lot of times we read these books and everything, but we quite know his story, like how he became, how he came into now writing all those books about the Spiritism and everything. So I think it's nice to learn a little bit of his journey, his life journey, because it is part of how the Spiritism started. But before we start to talk Allan Kardec, we first, it was working. No, can you change it for me, please? Thank you. Yeah. It was working, it's not working now, we'll see. So we have to talk, it's working now? Okay, thank you. I got a technical problem. So first we have to talk about Teresa Torres, which is the birth name for Allan Kardec. He was born in Lyon in October 3rd, 1804. He's from actually a very prestigious family, a family of magistrates, including his father who was a judge. So in the Parisian society, he was, quite well known. His family was quite well known. He was born and raised Roman Catholic. And since his early ages, he always had this interest in philosophy and science. So at the age of 15, 16, that's already how he was directing all his studies. He was a highly educated man. And since his early age, 15, 16, he already had this very scientific, rational mind. He already didn't believe in anything that's supernatural. He didn't believe in mysticism or anything. He already believed that if something happens, there is a why behind it. We may not have the capacity to understand or figure out, but there is. Like, he didn't believe in miracles, he didn't believe in supernatural, and that's exactly how he was already. So even as a teenager, he already had that scientific mind that everything had an answer for. There was not supernatural. That he already believed that nothing could go against the natural laws, right? The laws of nature. He became a follower and assistant for Pestalozzi, which we all probably know, right? Once is considered the father of the modern education. So Pestalozzi at the time created this educational system that it really was spread all over, especially France, Germany, and Switzerland. Pestalozzi was a Swiss pedagogue, and Kardec really embraced his style of his methodology of education, and helped him to found many schools in France. He was fluent in German, English, Spanish, Italian, and his native French, of course. So as you can see, someone who's really well educated. Okay? Between the years of 1819 until 1850, so for 31 years, Kardec put all his times and efforts educating and instructing kids and youth in Paris, most of them underprivileged. Now imagine a man with his high education that he had is wasting, because that's how people saw, wasting his knowledge and his time educating underprivileged kids in Paris. But that's what he thought. He always thought, you look at people around him as a big community. Right from the time he had the sense of community, that his life was actually to embrace the community, to embrace everything. As a society, we all should grow. So he really tried to spread as much as he could his educational system and bring all those kids up and give them a chance as well as being educated. But then, like I said, imagine today you have a doctorate degree, and it's already something like puts you like in a good position. Imagine 19th century, have a doctorate degree. How hard would it be for you to have a doctorate? How many people had a doctorate degree in the 19th century? And he had one, and he's uneducated. So the amount of resistance and difficulties that he had to face to be able to do this job during 31 years were huge. People could not accept what he was doing. So a lot of times he had a resistance. People would try to put his work down, would try to put as many criticism, everything, right? I don't even, the book actually, Obras Póstumas, which has not been translated, so I think it would be posthumous works, I think, the translation. Doesn't say anything about his family, but I doubt that his family even liked what he did, right? His father's a judge and everything, probably saying like, what the heck are you doing, right? But what was important about this phase, this 31 years, is that exactly because he had so much difficulty, had so much resistance to do all this work, two things that gave him already is the sense of community that he had, so he really embraced the society. And also, because he had so much resistance and everything, it helped him to actually train and practice patience, abnegation, hard work, willpower, and a love for the good cause. All characteristics that he would need for the second phase in his life that was coming for. So if you really see, because only this 31 years was much to prepare him for something way harder that's going to come. But before you go to become Allan Kardec, first we're going to need you to train you a little bit in here and see if you're really prepared to do the job that we have for you. So this 31 years was extremely important for him. It was extremely important to shape him, to give him the characteristics that he will need for the phase was about to come for Kardec. So by 1954, he's walking on the street and he runs into his friend, Mr. Fortier. So Mr. Fortier tells Kardec about, oh, you have no idea. I went to this group, this meeting, and they have these tables that they spin and they move side to side and they jump up and down. And then Kardec, was the very first time that Kardec heard about the turning tables. He's a man of science. Everything has to have an answer. At the time, they were really talking about like the big thing in science at the time was electricity and magnetism. There's tons of research about magnetism. It was used with people, and actually Mr. Fortier was a magnetizer, so used with magnetism. And it was used even like to hypnosis with people, and that's what Mr. Fortier used to do, right? But was used with people most of the time at the time. It was mostly the magnetism was used to hypnosis and that kind of stuff on people. And I heard that and said, well, you know what? I don't think it's impossible. I'm not saying that I believe in it, but I don't think it's impossible. Because what we know about magnetism and electricity, maybe if you give the right amount of electricity or magnetism to a thing, maybe it will move. Okay, it's possible. Goodbye, right? Didn't care much about it, didn't really think much about it, and he was fine. The problem is that sooner, like a short time later, he runs into Mr. Fortier again. But now Mr. Fortier tells him that the tapes are talking. So you're not gonna believe that the tapes are actually talking. So actually, if you ask them questions, they will answer to you with knocks and this, and then at that point, then Kardec will say, like, no, with all due respect, like really, I'm only gonna believe, first of all, if I see it for myself, and second, if someone can prove me that a table has a brain that can think, has a nerve system that can feel, and can be on a somnambulistic state. Until then, this to me is a fairy tale. That is exactly how he answered the guy when he told us that. This to me is a fairy tale, right? Makes no sense. Really now, you guys really pushing a little bit in here, right? And still, that thing was at the back of the Kardec, but Putin was like, how can those people believe in this, right? Again, very rational mind, that makes absolutely no sense. How can a table think and give the answers, right? About a year later, in 1855, he now runs into his friend, Mr. Carlotti. Mr. Carlotti was his friend for 25 years, an educated man, but he had a personality that was very like full of passion. You know, those people full of passion, gets enthusiastic about everything. And he and Mr. Carlotti has an hour of conversation. Mr. Carlotti is telling him everything about the stables, that they did speak and they did this. And he's the first one to tell to Kardec about the influence of the spirits. So he's the first guy to say that it's not that the table is talking, but it's being influenced by spirits. The problem is Kardec, again, rational mind, very scientific. And Mr. Carlotti is with so much passion, he's talking to him with so much passion and everything, that to Kardec, it sounded like, okay, he's a very nice man, has good intentions, but doesn't sound to me someone who have like a rational scientific mind. Probably just getting too enthusiastic with something that he didn't even properly analyze. Because it's too much enthusiasm here to me. Like it doesn't sound someone who, you know, like a kid that you give them a candy, they're already jumping up and down without even looking if it's a good candy or not. It's just, it's a candy. Let's go, you know, I'm enthusiastic. So that's how I felt Kardec. So his 1 hour conversation with Mr. Carlotti not only did it make him a believer, but actually, if anything, gave him even more doubts. It's like, I don't know. Later in the same year, he and Mr. Fortier, his friend, go to visit another friend. Actually, was one of the ladies that Mr. Fortier used to magnetize. And there, they met Mrs. Maison and Mr. Patier. And they both, they're a couple, and they used to run weekly mediumistic sessions in their home. And Mrs. Maison was the medium. So they both started to talk with Kardec, exactly the same subjects that Mr. Carlotti spoke with them, about the influence of the spirits and everything. But this time, especially Mr. Patier was a really highly educated man. He worked for the government, highly educated, and he was a man who had a very serious and tone of voice, very rational. So the way he was talking with Kardec was very rational. Very, as someone who really analyzed, and actually Kardec even described as a cold tone of voice. So it didn't sound to Kardec someone who was just enthusiastic about something that they saw, but someone who actually analyzed and, you know, and talking. And that put such a great impression on Kardec, such a positive impression on him that he said, you know what? So when they invited him to go to one of the sessions, he goes, yeah, okay, I'll go. So next week he goes. And then, and that is May 1855. And there, through Mrs. Maison, who's the medium, Kardec sees for the first time the tables that move side to side, that spin, and actually even sees the first, a very rudimentary written message, so psychographic message, through a basket with a pen, and it's the first time that he sees it. So he starts to go every week to see, because he looks at that and is like, wait a second, there is something in here. I'm not quite sure what it is, but there is something in here, right? So he is already thinking, wait a second, if it is a spirit that's influence, who's this spirit? Where's it coming from? Like his mind is already going, right? While everybody else saw as an entertainment, because that's what it was for them, an entertainment. Going to the sessions on Mr. Plenamison and Mr. Patier's house, they actually met in the Bodines family. So the Bodines family, Mr. Bodine had 2 teenager daughters. They're both mediums. One was 14, the other one 16. And Kardec right away started to go to their weekly sessions at the Bodines family. And that's what Kardec says about both groups. He says, I could see in those apparent futilities in the entertainment that was made of those phenomena something very serious, as the revelation of a new law which I decided to study in depth. Because that's exactly what it was, what they were doing. So when even the sessions at Miss Plenamison or the Bodines family, that's what they used for entertainment. So the subjects of the sessions were more what we see today being used as well, like, oh, what's going to be with my future? Am I going to make money? Am I going to get that job? That's what it was for. It was used for, entertainment. And in fact, their public sessions, they're open to whoever wanted to come. And most of the people that would come was just people was curious. Oh, I heard that there's tables that move. Well, let's go. So it's almost like I'm going there for the show than anything else. And setting off, like nobody actually look at that. So like, wait a second, there's something bigger in here. And that's exactly what Kardec saw. Like Kardec went there, like, hey, do you guys realize what's going on here? It's almost like those people sitting on top of a mine of gold, playing with little pebbles on top of this mine, right? Look at these pebbles of gold. And Kardec comes to say, wait a second, don't you guys realize you're sitting on top of a mine while you're playing just those little pebbles? This is like, there's something way bigger in here, right? So what Kardec does, he starts to go to the Bodines family weekly. But what he does right away, because now he's a scientist, right? He sees there's something here. I have to discover what it is. He's a scientist, so he's going to use his scientific methodology. So the same experimental methodology that he used to use when he was 15, 16, 18, he's now going to use now, right? And that's more or less his methodology. So what he did with the sessions, he would go every week with the questions were methodically created, right? So they have a sequence here on the questions, and he would go. But the way that he did to create the answer, the questions, and even how he would deal with how he created the questions and he would deal with the answers was pretty much based on this. So first, he never created a preconceived theory. So he never went already with the question like, oh, I know what it is, I just want to confirm. No, he would go and ask what it is, why this happens, right? So there's no preconceived question. Otherwise, we're already biased, right? When you go with preconceived questions, you kind of are biased already. He used cautious observation. So what is this spirit saying? Is this right? Is this wrong? Is this match? This is rational? This is not rational? So very cautious. Compare and deduce consequence. Wait a second, you said this answer here, but here you said this one. So it starts to compare. But you told me that before this, so what's about now? But you telling me that if this is what's happening, wouldn't that cause this consequence? So he also does a lot of deduction. But he deduces, compared, based on what the spirit said. So then he would deduce some consequence. And then re-ask again. But if this happens, wouldn't this happen? And the spirit is saying, no, this wouldn't happen. And you see this when you read the spirit's book, you can really see all of this methodology on his book and the way that the questions come, the sequence and everything. So from the effects, he tried to reach the causes by rational facts, because the truth is at this point, he only can see the effect. I know the table is spinning, but what's causing it, right? So by looking at the effects, he starts to look at the cause, because he realized that that's not the cause. There's something causing in there, but always based in rational facts. Because if you just tell me that it's because it is, or it gives me something that makes no sense, then I won't accept this question. But to me, the main one is actually this last one, because I think that's the most apparent when you read the Spirit's book, is that he never accepted an explanation as valid until he could solve all the difficulties of the question. And we always laugh when on Wednesdays doing the study of the Spirit's book, because of that. Because Kardec would ask the same questions in 5 different ways, but just different perspectives, but it's exactly the same questions. So sometimes the spirits will answer, haven't you already told you? Didn't you pay attention? We already told you this. Like, as we told you, be on question 105, they'll say, as we told you on question 25, right? It's kind of, but Kardec didn't care. He would ask. He would ask, okay, this is a pen, and this is right, the psychographic message. But if I change the color of the pen, will change the content of the message. They'll say, no, it doesn't change. The color of the pen doesn't matter. Okay, but if I change the color of the ink, no, Kardec, but he didn't care. He would cover everything. He wants to know everything. When you get all the answers, okay, now I have covered all the aspects of this subject. Now, and all the answers are rational and make sense. Now consider that this question or this subject has been responded. And you see this very clear on the book. The most important thing that Kardec learned right from the beginning, as he's doing now these questions. So, sorry, before that, when Kardec starts to bring this methodology to the sessions at the Bodines Family, it changed completely. It went from these completely futile sessions for entertainment and became these very serious sessions now, meetings. And even the people who used to go now is not the same public anymore. Because the people who are there just for the show, there's no show anymore. That's boring. They're talking about serious stuff. I'm not hearing that. So even the people that start to be part of the meetings is people now are more serious and more interested in really to learn and understand what's going on. So it changed completely. So Kardec really makes the sessions in there to be very serious and very directed towards the study and learning. And the most important thing that he learned right away from the beginning by asking questions, talking with the different spirits, is that he realized that there's different levels of evolution on the spirits. So he realized that you have the less evolved, they have like the medium, they have really enlightened spirits. And he started to realize that that makes even more serious when he's analyzing answers. Because he learned right away that he could not just get any answer as a valid just because it came from the spirit, because there is different levels of intellectual and moral amongst the spirits as well. So that made him to be even more serious about his analyzing the answers and putting all the knowledge together. And he also realized that even if I take 2 superior spirits, that let's say they're more or less the same level of development, doesn't mean that one of them can give me all the knowledge. It's the same thing with us. If I get two people with a PhD, but one has PhD in physics, the other one has PhD in biology, they can tell me a lot of things on their own, whatever they know. Like the guy from physics is not going to give me the same knowledge about biology than the guy who has a PhD on biology. So he realized that he could not get all the knowledge from one spirit. Let's say I'm going to choose this one spirit who's the evolved spirit I recognize, and he's going to answer every single question for me that I need to know. He realized it could not be like that. He really needed a group of spirits because each one would be more knowledgeable than the other depending on the subject, right? So it had to be a collective effort amongst the spirits as well to bring him what he wanted. And that was very important for him when he was preparing his books, when he was preparing the knowledge, to have this understanding right from the beginning. So now it's 1856. He already had so many interactions through the Bodines family that he realized that as he started to get all these answers and everything, he starts to have this feeling, I have to write this down. I have to publish this. Like I have too much information on my hand that needs to be put on something. So the idea of a book starts to grow inside of him. And in 1856, he pretty much has already enough material to create this book. But then that year, he meets Mr. Rostan and Mrs. Jaffet, a couple who also had weekly meetings, mediumistic meetings in their house. But contrary to the Bodines family, their meetings was already very serious, very well ordered and everything. Kardec starts to go to their weekly sessions immediately, like weekly. Also, so for a while, he's now going to the Bodines family, and he's going to Mrs. Jaffet, and the medium was Mrs. Jaffet. She was the medium. And what he decided to do is like, you know what? I got all these answers from the spirits that came through the media, the Bodines teenagers. But how about if I test some of these questions? Should I maybe use a different medium, different spirits, and see if I get the same answers or not? So what he decides to do with the Mrs. Jaffet, it's use her to test, especially that the questions were more complicated, a little more, there was more polemic. So he decides to test them. So that's exactly what he does. For a while, he starts to give the same answers, the same questions to Mrs. Jaffet, to the spirits through Mrs. Jaffet, and test the answers. That's what he starts to do. And the spirits actually tell him, okay, that's actually a good idea that you're doing, but we don't want you to do any more on the public's meetings with the Mrs. Jaffet. What you're gonna do is once a week, you're gonna have a private meeting with her, and that's where we're gonna be helping you. And that's what they do. But Kardec's not happy. He says, okay, I know I'm using two different medias, different spirits, kind of the answers are matching here, but I want to test this a little bit further. And so what he does is he gets to send to other medias, and then by the time he has all the material prepared to write his first book, he already has 10 mediums at the time answering him, helping him to get those answers, and to really saying, yeah, there is a consistency in here. I think I'm pretty sure I can now be certain about the things I'm putting in this book. During the same time, he gets having something very interesting with Kardec. He's actually at home trying to write this book, and he starts to hear knocks on the wall. And this starts, every time he would sit down trying to write, the knocks on the wall, and it would disturb him. So he would get up, try to find, but every time that he would stop writing and go try to find where the knock was coming, the knock would stop. And then he would sit down, start trying to write, and the knocks would start. And then he would stop it to try to find, and he couldn't find. It's not coming from the neighbors, not coming nuts, not coming nuts. He couldn't find. That was driving him nuts. His wife comes, and what's going on? Like, I don't know, but there's this knocks here that I don't know where it's coming from. And every time I try to write down, they start, and every time I stop, they stop. So I don't know, but this is really bothering me. Anyways, next day he goes to the Bodines family, and he asks the spirit to say, do I have a spiritual guide? And the spirit says, yes, you do. And then he goes, may I know who he is? And he goes, well, why don't you ask him? He's here right now. And he goes, oh. And he goes, a spiritual guide was you yesterday in my house knocking? And he goes, yes, it was me. And may I know why, like you're trying to get my attention, what it was? He goes, yes, because there's something that you wrote yesterday that doesn't please me, that it's wrong. And Kardec goes, oh yeah, I know, I totally agree with you. I actually rewrite. I wrote this, I wasn't happy myself with what I was writing. And this morning I threw everything out and I rewrote everything again. And he goes, it's still not good. No, but I rewrote it. Like I redid it. He goes, read again between the 3rd line and the 30th line, and you're going to see a major mistake in there. Kardec's like, And then he asks his guide, goes, who are you? May I know who you are? And then he goes, for you, I'll be called the truth. And as we know, there's many psychographic messages in this gospel, and the spiritism that comes from the spirit of truth. He goes, for you, I'm the truth. I'll be called the truth. And he goes, were you like someone famous on earth, or like before here, like incarnate or something? And he goes, pretty much in a very nice way. He didn't talk about, but pretty much that's not your business. But in a nice way, he goes, that's unnecessary for you to know right now. The only thing that you need to know is that I'll be with you the whole time. And in fact, I'm going to give you, once a month, I'll give you 15 minutes answering questions for you. And Kardec goes, but there's any possibility to be more than that if you need? He goes, yes, there is. But 15 minutes once a month, that's a promise I'm giving to you. Kardec then says that the night he goes back home, and he goes and reads between the 30th line and the 3rd line and 30th line. And sure enough, as there's such a big mistake in there that he said, I don't even know how I wrote that down. So then he corrects everything and he goes forward. So that's when he learns about his spiritual guide, and he learns that's the spirit of truth. So finally, he has enough material. He decides to go and publish his first book. So 1857, we have the first edition of the Spirits book. And then becomes the name of Allan Kardec. And why Allan Kardec? Because at the time when he was going to publish the book, he decides, okay, should I go as Denis Rivail? Not, what do I do? Because at the time, as a Denis Hippolyte Leon Rivail, he was really, really well respected in the science world in France at the time, because he very well known, very respected. And he thought that actually maybe using his birth name would actually cause a problem, which most of us would think, oh, Bob, because he was already recognized and respected, and he thought, no, this is going to actually create a problem, and I don't think it's good for me to use my birth name. Because, and I think also he wants to separate a little bit his previous works, what he was doing at that moment. Because if he hadn't put all together, even his previous works in some way would be damaged, and it was so important all the work that he did as an educator. So he decides to use the name of Allan Kardec, which one of the spirits had revealed to him. There was a name that he had on a previous incarnation when he was a druid. So he decides to use Allan Kardec. So Allan Kardec is born. Okay. 501 questions, and if you think, oh, but the Spirit's book has 1,019 questions. That's true. But the first edition had only 101 questions and was divided in 3 parts. So was the Spiritist doctrine, moral laws, and consolations and hopes. That's how was divided the book. And trust me, they tried to attack him so much when this came out, and actually through his whole life as creating the base of the Spirit, was attacked so much that even after he was dead, because they couldn't attack him anymore, they actually attacked him on the fact that he used the name Allan Kardec. So his wife, a widow, an elderly woman, had to go to court to respond because they said that he was faking. So funny, because everybody used pseudonymous to publish books, but for him, no, they said everything that he wrote was fake, and that's why he used someone else's name. That he was using someone else's name. It's like they tried to find everything they could find, and that's exactly what his wife says in court. Everybody publishes stuff, books, and everything under pseudonymous. That's exactly what he did. What's the difference in here, right? But even that, they tried to find it as a last resource to try to destroy his work. So this is one of the things that actually Kardec was told when he was told him about his mission. They told him exactly everything that he was going to suffer to make this mission be accomplished. And Kardec wrote a letter, and so he was told about his missions in 1857, and in 1867 he wrote a letter, and that's exactly what he said. He said, "This is everything that I had to went through to write those books." He had problems with hate by obstinated enemies that attacked him in every single level that they could, slander, jealousy and envy, published accusations. So stuff was published in the books accusing him that today would call fake news. Betrayed by the ones that he trusted the most. People that in front of him showed up in support of his cause, and behind him was stabbing him on the back. Ingratitude by the ones that he had helped. But in that same letter, when he describes everything that he had to go through, he said, how ungrateful I would be if I had to complain about anything of this. Because the amount of support that I received, material and spiritual, that I have received from the spiritual plan, the way that they supported, the happiness and the joy that I could experience in my heart, every time that someone came to me and said, thanks to the teachings of Spiritism that you brought, I found the consolation to go through hard times in my life. I said, there's no price for this. So I said, I would be ungrateful if I had to complain about anything that I went through, because I received way more than actually I suffered. And he says, and actually, we think always this battles between the good and the bad, and he goes, it's not, because the good is always bigger than the bad. Always. So there's no balance and they fight each other. No, the good is always higher than the bad. So that's Kardec. Because sometimes when you see, he said all these messages from the spirits, and look how fantastic, right? But we forgot everything that he had to go through to make this go. So if he had a resistance as an educator, as someone who was writing the codificator of the Spiritism, he suffered 10 times more, because now he was really starting to shake the base of people who did not have their bases shaken. So, 1858, he decides to write the Spiritist Magazine, and he decides to do on his own. Doesn't tell anybody. He actually just goes to the publisher and says, "I'm publishing." He pays for it. He has nobody's financing him. He pays out of his pocket. And don't think that when I say that spirits helped him materially and spiritually, the materially means that they give him a good life. It's like, we're going to give it exactly what you need to get by, but you're always going to have what you need. Kardec most of the time was penniless, no money for medication. He really spent all his health by working for the Spiritism. But whatever was needed, he came and he got whatever he had in his pocket and said, "I'm going to publish this magazine." So in January 1st, 1858, he published the first issue of the magazine. And he says that later on, he actually very grateful that he did out of his pocket and had no financial help, because it could give me the freedom to publish whatever I want. Because if there was someone else financing, they probably could say, "Oh, no, I don't want this subject I wanted to put in there. Oh, no, I don't like it." So give him the freedom to actually publish whatever he wanted and to talk about whatever subjects he wanted. He, in 1 year, the magazine had so much success that he was already being distributed in all the continents of the globe. And some years he had to do a second edition, like second running printing, because otherwise people wouldn't have enough for everybody who wanted. The amount of subscribers that he had was huge. And it became a fantastic lab for him, a laboratory for him to test his questions, to test the subjects, and enrich his knowledge to be able to write the following books. So was one of the greatest things that he did was the Spiritist Magazine. Also in the same year, on April 1st, he opens the Paris Spiritist Society, which pretty much, I would probably gonna guess, the first spirit center kind of in Paris. And it's very interesting because he starts in his home. The problem starts to grow so much, it doesn't fit in the house anymore. So someone says, "Okay, let's rent a place." The problem is that at the time, they were under the government of Napoleon III, and there was a law that you could not have meetings in a closed space with more than 20 people unless you had a license. Because I think more than 20 people, I think they thought it was a rebellion. So 20 people, it's okay. More than 20 need to have a special license. And of course, not by coincidence, one of the generals that could give the license was actually sympathetic to the Spiritist cause. So they got the license in 15 days, when normally it takes 3 months, right? And then they started the Paris Spiritist Society now. So they had to actually start in Kardec's home, and they moved it to a new location. And it was great as well because it became, this place as well for practice, for exchanging of knowledge. In the beginning, Kardec says that they would accept anybody, so that was actually a problem because there's people with different levels of knowledge and everything, so it was hard to get like an homogeneous group, but over time they were able to reach it. 1860 comes the second edition of the Spirit's book, now with the 1019 questions, which is the version that we have today. He didn't correct anything on the previous questions. What he did to the previous questions was more add comments, extra explanations, but there's no corrections made, but there was just extra added, and then he added all the new questions, another over 500 questions with the new subjects, new things that he hadn't spoke about before. This was more like an adding, but there's no correction to it. 1861 comes the Medium's book, and Medium's book is pretty much a book about the relationship of the spiritual world with the incarnated and discarnated world, how this connection is done, how the psychographics, it's almost like a more technical book. Talks about also about the moral of the mediums when they are practicing the mediumship, but it's very more to teach how it happens, this interaction between incarnated and discarnated world. 1864, the gospel according to the Spiritism. And there's something very interesting about the gospel according to the Spiritism. So when Kardec decides to write the gospel according to the Spiritism, he doesn't tell anybody either. he decides that he's going to write the book and don't tell anybody. So what he does, he goes to a cottage. There was a cottage in a small city that he always used to like to go when he needs solitude and he needs time to like a calm time to write and think. And that's what he does. He goes to that city. Nobody knows that he's writing this book, not even the editor of the book. Mr. Didier was the editor of the book, only found out of the book when he came with the book ready and said, let's publish. And actually the name that Kardec gave to the book was The Imitation of the Gospel, which Mr. Didier didn't like. Like, I don't think it sounds good, this name. And then Mr. Didier is the one who suggests let's do the Gospel according to the Spiritism. And then Kardec said, like, actually, no, that's a good idea. The Spirits also approve, and that's how it's published. It's published as the Gospel according to the Spiritism. But the interesting thing is that nobody knew that he was there in the cottage writing the book, right? Nobody knew. But as he's there writing the book, finishing the book, a medium in Bordeaux receives a message, a psychographic message, which actually ended up being published in the Spiritist Magazine in December of 1864. And I'm going to read that message for you guys because I think it's a very, very important message. And that's what the Spirit says. A new book has just appeared. It is a brighter light that comes to lighten your march. 18 centuries ago, by the order of my father, I came to bring the word of God to men of goodwill. I came to bring the good by the order of my father. This word has been forgotten by most men, and the incredulity, materialism came to drown out the good grain that had been deposited in your earth. Today, by the order of the eternal, the good spirits, their messengers, come to every corner of the globe to make heard the resounding trumpet. Listen to their voices. They are intended to show you the path that leads to the feet of the Father in heaven. Be docile to his teachings. The predicted times are come. All the prophecies will be fulfilled. The tree is known by its fruits. See what the fruits of Spiritism are. Couples where discord had replaced harmony have returned to peace and happiness. Men who succumbed to the weight of their afflictions, awakened by the melodious chords of voices from beyond the grave, realized that they were going the wrong way, and ashamed of their weakness, repented and asked the Lord for strength to endure their trials. Trials and atonements. This is the condition of man on earth. Atonement of the past. Trials to strengthen you against temptation, to develop the spirit through the activity of struggle, to habituate you to master the matter, and to prepare you for the pure joys that await you in the spiritual world. There are many mansions in my Father's house. I told you this 18 centuries ago. Spiritism has made these words understandable. And you, my beloved workers, who endure the heat of the day, who believe that you have to mourn over the unrighteousness of luck, bless your sufferings. Thank God who gives you the means to pay off past debts. Pray, not with your lips, but with an improved heart, that you may take better place in my Father's house. As you know, the great will be humbled, but the small and the humble will be exalted. The Spirit of Truth. So that's the Spirit behind this message. It was written when Kardec was reading the book in a completely different city, and nobody knew that he was writing. Most interesting thing is that when Kardec publishes this magazine in December 1864, in no moment he says the word Jesus. He does not dare to say that was Jesus who wrote this message. Does not dare. In fact, he's so humble and he's the first one to follow his own teachings that he wrote in the Medium's book, that he says, we do not are going to be attached to the signatures. We'll be attached to the, he says, I cannot verify the signature. That's what he says. I cannot say the veracity of the signature. What I can say is the content clearly comes from a pure and high spirit. That I can say. And I can see that when I look to this message and I look to other messages I have received from the Spirit of the Truth, they have the same tone, they have the same vocabulary. That's I can say. As for the veracity, I cannot say anything. That's how humble he was. And on his explanation at the end, he says, because the medium was truly humble, the first action they would have before a message like this was to doubt, because he would know he's not worthy of the favor. Because he thought that if this was really who was writing, it was not because he deserved it. It would be a favor, would be doing me a favor to talk to me. And even that favor, I don't think I'm worthy of it. Okay. So that's what Kardec does when he receives this message. Anybody can take some conclusions, but it is like if he didn't have Jesus himself as his guide, he had someone who was probably a messenger direct from Jesus guiding him and helping him. Because that's the other thing that we know about signatures in messages. It may not be necessarily the spirit itself, but it could be a messenger, direct messenger from that spirit, and they will sign as whoever sent the message. It's the same thing if someone comes and tells me, okay, can you tell Marco this? I'm going to say, Marco, ask to tell you. I'm not going to say that the message is mine. So sometimes that's what could happen as well, right? And Kardec, so he's the first one to follow his teachings that he's in the Medium's book, right? And say, I don't know. It is not, I don't know. I just know that the content is pure. And that's what it's important. So it shows how humble he was and how rational he was as well, right? Because at this point, he could come and say, hey, look who's my guiding here. And his mission would be, just down the way, right? And that's what he did. So it comes the Gospel according to the Spiritism, which to me, of the 5 books, is my favorite. If you're going to leave me with just one book, leave me with the Gospel according to the Spiritism. And I'm pretty sure I'll be guided for life. Kardec keeps working. 1865, Heaven and Hell, a book that's unfortunately nobody talks about it, but it's a fantastic book. It tells us about, of course, heaven and hell. So it starts to break with this centuries of concept that you either go to hell and you're being punished for eternity, or even a more absurd concept that you go to heaven and do nothing. Like literally, how boring it is, right? I don't know. But I think either way, it's, and how much this concept of an eternal punishment and eternal doing nothing absolutely does not match with that God that we like to say that's pure love and it's pure justice, right? How a father has pure love will punish their kids for eternity, or separate families, because then if I go to heaven and my kid goes to hell and we're going to eternity, that's what is separating families, right? What kind of a justice that's what loving father is that? So Kardec brings the new concepts of heaven and hell, right? That we don't have this eternal punishment, but we also don't have this famous rest in peace of going there and doing nothing, right? Doesn't exist. So we start to be in a very rational way. And my favorite part is the second part of the book, because it brings conversations between him and spirits on 3 different levels. So spirits, he starts with spirits, he calls unhappy spirits, so the spirits who are in the umbral and, suffering. They have the spirits that he calls neutral. They're not suffering, but they're happy, they're okay there. And then they have spirits, right? So what they did in here, so basically what the spirits will tell is what happened with them are incarnated, and what was the consequences on the other side. So to me, it's an absolutely fantastic book. I really love this book. 1868 comes his last book, Genesis. Kardec by then is quite sick already. Like, he really spent all his energy and health by doing all the work that he did. Comes the Genesis. Some people think probably one of the hardest books to read from him. It is talking about the creation of Earth and talks about what's the development of Earth in terms of planet, material planet, and in terms of moral development. So about what we hear and what's going. Talks a bit of this transition that we're going now, the different planets. So it can be a little bit of a technical book. I'm not going to say that I understood everything because it would be a lie, but I didn't think it was that hard to read, right? But then again, I think Evolution into Worlds is like a nightmare to read. Some people read it like it was, the easiest thing ever. I thought it was okay to read. So don't be afraid of reading Genesis, at least try. I think it's a very good book. And then, unfortunately, 1869, March 31st, Kardec discarnated of an aneurysm. And his body was buried in the Cimetière de Père Lachaise in Paris. And at the top of his tomb here in French is written, "To be born, die, again be reborn. So progress unceasingly, such is the law." That's what's written on top of his grave in there. I did have the privilege to go and visit the tomb. And as you guys can see this amount of flowers in here. The day that I went to see, I had to stay like 2 meters away because of the amount of flowers around this tomb. So what I did, I went to the office of the Cimetière de Père Lachaise, and I wanted to know where his grave was. And they basically, because it's pretty much a touristic attraction in Paris, and they have a map, actually, because the amount of famous people buried in this place, like from scientists, poets, writers, artists, like Frederic Chopin is there, Edith Piaf, Jim Morrison, name it, there's tons. So they have a map with the graves of everybody. There's a list, right? And but pretty much grab the map and good luck, because it's more or less here and it's more or less there, right? So what I was actually told is that Kardec's grave is the only grave that is full of flowers all year round. No matter which day you go there, it's full of flowers. And true enough, when I went, was tons of flowers in there, tons of flowers. And I remember visiting some of the other famous graves, and they had pretty much nothing in there. It was full of flowers. And I remember the day that I was there, there's this French woman standing there praying. And until this day, I don't know how we communicate, because my French is almost inexistent. But I remember, but for some reason, I was able to understand what she was saying. And she was there to thank, to be grateful. And the flowers that you see in his grave, it's from people from all over the world that come to thank him for the work that he has done. And that's what she was doing there. Saying, thank you very much. So today with this lecture, that's what I hope to bring to us a little bit, this sense of gratitude to Kardec, to the work that he did, because he didn't just bring us the Spiritism. He brought to us the promised consoler. That's what he did, the one that consolates us every time we go to a hard time. Thank you.
Thanks, Teresa. We do have time for a few questions or comments if anyone have one. And if there is anyone in the internet as well, Luciana is there in the back. She'll read the question for us. No questions, no comments? All right. Well, thank you so much, Teresa. It's great that we had this lecture this week, because next week we're gonna have Cosme Massi here, Cosme is one of the guys has been studying Kardec and his work in deep. You know, he created a website called kardecpedia.com. There's a lot. It's a very nice web page created because you can relate different topics in Kardec's book. So he will be here at TSS giving a lecture to us. The topic for the lecture will be, one second, this time, it will be the knowledge of yourself. So you'll be here. Just after that, we're gonna have our lunch. You know, usually our lunch and learn is on the second Sunday. Next month, because of the Thanksgiving holiday, we're bringing it for the first one. So just after the lecture, we're gonna have our lunch, which will be visual. So everybody's welcome to come. And the other thing that is happening in the month of October, at the end of the month, October 26th and 27th, we're gonna have the Toronto Spiritist Weekend. It's a group of lectures that will be done we in conjunction with the other Spirit Center here in Toronto, like Joan de Angelis. And the theme for that weekend will be health, the perfect harmony of your soul. So what's gonna happen is because of the lectures that will happen on Saturday and Sunday, TSS will not have a lecture here that Sunday on the 27th. So the device there is not here. It will be in a place called it. It's not in my picture here, but it's in the OFT. So if you go into the website and look for the Toronto Spirits Weekend, and TSS website, you can also find some information there. Toronto Spirits Weekend, you have the address there, and it's Saturday and Sunday. There is a tickets being sold because we have speakers coming from US and to rent the space, etc. So there is some expense that we're gonna have. So we are asking for donations to people to participate. Tickets is being sold online. You can check the website and there you can see. Just one thing, we are selling for early birds now, so there's a cost now until tomorrow. Tomorrow I think it's the last day of the month, so tomorrow is the last day of the tickets on the early bird. So buy it now. Next in October the 1st, we're gonna increase a little bit the cost. So we're gonna take a lower cost go now. All right. So just want to give this two message before we close to the passes because of all the friends watching us for the event. Okay. So thank you very much. We're gonna stop the transmission. I invite you guys to do your own final prayer at home, and we're gonna get prepared for the passes now. Thank you.